It was an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon, the kind that slipped by unnoticed, blending into the monotony of daily life. The house was quiet, save for the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, a sound so familiar that it had become background noise. I had spent most of the day alone, my mom out running errands, leaving the space feeling emptier than usual. My stepbrother Jake had just returned from work, his arrival marked only by the faint creak of the front door and the shuffle of his footsteps as he made his way inside. No greeting, no words, just a fleeting presence passing through. It wasn't unusual. That was just how things were between us. Jake and I had never been close, not in the way siblings were supposed to be. There were no childhood memories of playing games or bonding over silly inside jokes. Our relationship wasn't hostile, but it was distant, as if an invisible line had been drawn between us that neither of us dared to cross. He was my stepbrother by marriage, and though we had lived under the same roof for the past 2 years, it had never felt like we were truly family. Maybe it was the differences between us, our personalities, our habits, or maybe it was something else, something unspoken that simmered just beneath the surface, something we both knew was there but chose to ignore. I stood in the kitchen, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, waiting for the water to boil. Cooking had always been a distraction for me, a way to quiet the restless thoughts that sometimes crept into my mind when I was alone. I had decided on something simple, pasta, something quick, easy, comforting. But even as I stirred the pot, I couldn't shake the odd heaviness in the air. Jake had come home earlier than usual. I had heard him walk in, head straight to his room, shutting the door behind him without a word. That wasn't strange in itself. He had always been private, keeping to himself more often than not. But today felt different. There was an energy lingering in the house, something subtle yet impossible to ignore. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow and deliberate, pulling me from my thoughts. I didn't have to look to know it was him. Jake had a presence that was impossible to ignore, even when he wasn't saying anything. "You making something?" His voice was casual, but there was an edge to it, something in his tone that made my stomach twist slightly. I glanced over my shoulder, keeping my expression neutral. "Just some pasta," I replied. "You want some?" He leaned against the counter across from me, shrugging in that effortless way he always did. "Maybe," he said, his gaze flickering from the bubbling pot back to me. There was something about the way he looked at me, sharp, assessing, like he was trying to figure something out. Jake was older than me by a few years, and he carried himself with a confidence that I had never quite been able to match. He was the kind of person who never second-guessed himself, someone who always seemed sure of what he wanted. It was intimidating sometimes, how effortlessly he could command a room without even trying. "You've been quiet lately," he remarked. I hesitated, stirring the pasta to avoid looking at him directly. "Yeah, I guess." He moved again, stepping closer this time, his presence unmistakable even though we weren't touching. There was something about Jake, something about the way he moved, the way he existed in my space without hesitation, that made it impossible to ignore him. "You okay?" he asked, his voice lower now, softer. A shiver ran down my spine, but I forced myself to keep my composure. "Yeah," I said quickly. "Why wouldn't I be?" He didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned slightly over my shoulder, his arm brushing against mine as he glanced down at the pot. The contact was brief, almost accidental, but it sent a jolt through me nonetheless. "You just seem different," he said after a moment, his voice barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard, gripping the wooden spoon in my hand a little tighter. The heat from the stove wasn't the only warmth I felt, and I hated that realization. "I'm fine," I repeated, though the words felt thin, unconvincing. Jake didn't step back. If anything, he moved in closer, his chest nearly pressing against my back. I could feel the heat radiating from him, the faint scent of his cologne mixing with the steam rising from the pot. My breath hitched involuntarily, and I prayed he didn't notice. "You don't seem fine," he murmured. "You seem like you've been avoiding me." I stiffened. He wasn't wrong. I had been avoiding him, though I hadn't admitted it to myself until now. It wasn't intentional, at least not in the obvious sense. But something between us had shifted over the past few months, an unspoken tension that neither of us had acknowledged, but both of us had felt. "I'm not avoiding you," I said, though even I could hear the unsteadiness in my voice. Jake didn't move away. If anything, he lingered, his presence suffocating in a way that made my head spin. His breath was warm against the side of my neck, his proximity making it impossible to focus on anything else. "Then look at me," he said quietly. I hesitated. My fingers clenched around the edge of the counter like it could somehow keep me grounded, keep me steady. But I knew there was no escaping this moment. Slowly I turned to face him, and that was where it all began. The warmth of Jake's fingers brushed against my arm, and the lightest touch sent a shock through me, sharp and sudden. My body tensed, not knowing how to react or what to do with the surge of heat. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but my body was already betraying me in ways I hadn't been ready for. "Are you sure about this?" His voice was soft, but carried a weight I couldn't quite understand. It wasn't just curiosity, there was something deeper in it, a quiet urgency. "You've been distant." I turned my head slightly, enough to meet his eyes, and the expression there hit me like a wave. It wasn't the look of concern I had been expecting. No, this was something else, something fierce, something raw. His gaze locked onto mine with an intensity that stole my breath away. It was desire, undeniable and real, and it made my heart race. Jake didn't pull back. Instead, he leaned closer, his lips barely grazing my ear. "You don't need to keep pushing me away," he whispered, his voice so close it sent a shiver down my spine. "No need to pretend anymore." My heart hammered in my chest as my thoughts spun out of control. This was Jake, my stepbrother, the guy I'd been living with for 2 years. But in this moment, he didn't feel like family. He felt like something else entirely, something that thrilled me, but also scared me in ways I couldn't explain. "I'm not pretending," I said quietly, but my voice wavered, like I was trying to convince myself as much as him. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face, and it made my stomach flutter with something I couldn't name. His hand moved to my hip, just barely touching me, and I felt a rush of heat spread through me at the simple contact. My breath caught, and every part of me was suddenly aware of him in a way I hadn't anticipated. I didn't know what to do with it. "I think you are," he murmured, his voice low and smooth. "But it's all right. You don't have to pretend anymore." The air in the kitchen felt dense, like the walls were closing in around us, trapping me in the moment. His hand rested there, light but heavy with intent, and I could feel the weight of it, the heat of his touch traveling through my body like wildfire. My thoughts were a tangled mess, and I couldn't make sense of how we had gotten here. How had something so simple turned into this? Something charged, something I couldn't explain. I could hear my own heartbeat as Jake's fingers shifted, just enough to remind me of the distance between us. His body was so close that I could feel the heat of it radiating against mine, and his breath was warm against the side of my neck. It wasn't an obvious touch, but it was enough to set every nerve on edge. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I just stood there, frozen, as his presence pulled me in deeper. "I've seen the way you look at me," Jake murmured, his voice a whisper that sent a wave of chills through me. "I've been paying attention." I froze, my heart skipping a beat as his words sank in. A rush of confusion, panic, and desire surged through me all at once. This was my stepbrother, yet the way he was speaking to me, the way he was touching me, made it impossible to ignore the tension that had been building between us for so long. "I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered, trying to hold on to control, but my voice cracked, betraying me in ways I couldn't hide. Jake's hand tightened on my hip, drawing me just a little closer, and I could feel the heat of his body pressing against mine. I should have pulled away, should have stopped this before it escalated any further, but I couldn't. My body refused to listen. "You don't have to lie," he whispered, his lips brushing against my ear, sending another shiver down my spine. "I know you feel it too." I swallowed hard, trying to gather my thoughts, but everything was a blur. My body was responding to him in ways I couldn't control, couldn't deny. I knew I should have pushed him away, but instead I stayed there, frozen in place, unable to do anything but feel the tension building between us. "I don't—" My voice faltered as his hand moved, sliding from my hip to the small of my back, pulling me even closer. The pressure, the heat, it was overwhelming. The unspoken desire that had been simmering between us for months finally felt undeniable. "You don't need to say anything." Jake's voice was soft but insistent. Just stop pretending. His hand moved up my back slowly, tracing the curve of my spine with the delicate fingers. A shiver ran through me, my breath quickening as the reality of what was happening started to sink in. This wasn't just a moment. It was real, and there was no turning back now. I turned just enough to meet his gaze, and the intensity in his eyes nearly made me lose my breath. This wasn't just about physical attraction. It was something deeper, something more complicated. It made my pulse quicken even more. "You've been avoiding me," Jake said softly, his eyes searching mine for any sign of hesitation. But there was none. Why? I couldn't find the words to answer him. Maybe I had been avoiding him because I knew this moment was coming. Maybe I had been trying to ignore the way my body reacted to him, the way he made me feel. But standing here, with his hand on my back and his breath warm against my skin, I knew that denying it any longer wasn't an option. "I don't know," I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. Jake's lips curled into a small, knowing smile that sent a sharp thrill through me. "I think you do," he murmured, leaning in closer. His lips brushed lightly against my neck, soft, playful, and the sensation made my whole body shiver in response. The kitchen seemed to blur, the world shrinking down until it was just the two of us. The warmth of his body against mine, the feel of his lips grazing my skin. "Jake," I breathed, unsure of what I was about to say, or what I even wanted to say. My thoughts were tangled, every word escaping me. He pulled back, just enough to meet my gaze, and the look in his eyes made my pulse quicken once again. The intensity there was palpable, burning through me. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly, his voice low. "Just let it happen." Before I could even form a response, Jake closed the distance between us. His lips found mine in a kiss that started gentle, hesitant, as if he was waiting for me to pull away. But I didn't. My body responded before my mind could catch up, and the tension between us snapped. The kiss deepened slowly, purposefully, as Jake's hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. The heat between us was overwhelming, consuming. I found myself leaning into him, desperate for the closeness, the intensity of it all. My mind spun, a whirlwind of confusion and desire, but none of it mattered anymore. All I could focus on was the feel of his lips on mine, the touch of his hands on my skin, the way my body betrayed me in ways I hadn't expected. We finally broke apart, both breathless, our foreheads resting together as we tried to steady our breathing. My heart hammered in my chest, my mind still reeling from everything that had just happened. The same turmoil reflected in Jake's eyes. Desire, confusion, but also something deeper, something unspoken, but undeniable. "This changes everything," I whispered, my voice shaky, barely louder than my heartbeat. Jake nodded, his hand still resting on the back of my neck, his thumb caressing the skin there. "Yeah," he said softly, "but maybe that's okay." I pulled back just enough to look at him properly, my heart racing as I tried to process everything. There was no denying what had just transpired between us. We had crossed a line, and now everything was different. But it didn't feel wrong. It felt complicated. "We need to be careful," I said, my voice fragile but sincere. "We can't let this get out of control." Jake smiled, his hand sliding back down to my hip. "We'll take it slow," he promised, his tone reassuring. "We don't have to rush anything." The weight of his words settled over me, and for the first time since all this started, I felt a wave of calm. We didn't need to have it all figured out right now. We didn't need to know exactly what this meant or where it would go. We just needed to be here, together, and take it one step at a time. I nodded slowly, still trying to make sense of the whirlwind inside me. Jake leaned in again, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead. The simplicity of the gesture, its tenderness, made something tighten in my chest, an emotion I couldn't quite name. As the minutes passed, the tension in the room began to shift, becoming something softer, more comfortable. The urgency had ebbed away, but the connection between us remained, simmering just beneath the surface. "We'll figure it out," Jake said quietly, his eyes searching mine for any sign of hesitation. For the first time, I realized I wasn't afraid. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew we'd figure it out together. Then it hit me. The weight of what had just happened between us lingered in the air, making every breath feel heavier. My mind was still spinning from the kiss, from the feel of Jake's hands on me, from the fact that I hadn't pulled away. It wasn't just the kiss that had changed things. It was the realization that I had wanted it, that I had been waiting for this moment without even knowing it. Jake took a step back, giving me some space, but his eyes never left mine. There was something there, a look that made my heart race again, something telling me this wasn't just a fleeting moment for him either. "You okay?" he asked softly, his voice gentle but filled with the same intensity that had been building between us for months. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what I was feeling. The kiss had stirred up a storm inside me, so many emotions and questions that I couldn't even begin to answer. But one thing was clear. Whatever this was, it wasn't going away. "I'm okay," I replied, my voice shaking slightly but honest. "I just wasn't expecting that." Jake smiled, a small, almost relieved smile. "Neither was I," he admitted. His hand was still resting lightly on my hip, but now that it had happened, his eyes searched mine, as if trying to find the right words to explain what he was feeling. But there were no easy words for this. It was uncharted territory, and we were both figuring out what it meant as we went. Jake stepped closer again, his hand rising to gently cup my face. His thumb brushed against my cheek in the softest, most tender way. The touch made my heart flutter, exciting and terrifying all at once. I had never seen this side of him before, this openness, this vulnerability, and it made everything feel more real than it ever had. "I don't want to ruin this," Jake murmured, his tone sincere and low. "I'm not eager to jump in head first, but I can't ignore what's happening between us either." His words struck me like a surge of warmth, stirring emotions I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. This wasn't a casual fling, it was real, and it carried the weight of possible life-changing consequences. The very thought both terrified and exhilarated me. "I feel the same," I admitted softly, my voice trembling with honesty. "But we need to be cautious. It's all so complicated." Jake's thumb continued its gentle caress along my cheek as he nodded. "I know," he replied. "We don't need every answer right this second. Let's take it slowly, one step at a time." His simple assurance brought an unexpected calm over me. Perhaps we didn't need to unravel everything right away. Maybe we could just let things happen naturally, without the pressure of defining every moment. I exhaled deeply, feeling some of the tension in my chest ease away. "One step at a time," I echoed, finding steadiness in those words. A warm smile spread over Jake's face as his hand shifted from my face to rest lightly on my shoulder. "We'll figure it out," he said gently, and with that, his words seemed to wrap around me like a promise. In that moment, a sense of clarity emerged. There was no need to rush. We didn't have to label what was unfolding between us right away. All that mattered was being here, together, and taking each day as it came. Jake's hand trailed down my arm, sending a familiar spark through me. I leaned into the touch, allowing the simmering tension between us to settle into something more bearable. It was still there, quietly intense, but now it felt like a natural part of our connection, rather than an overwhelming force. Glancing toward the stove, I said with a soft laugh, "We should probably get back to dinner. That pasta isn't going to finish itself." Jake chuckled, his hand giving mine a gentle squeeze. "Yeah, you're right," he agreed. We moved to resume our evening routine, the charged energy between us now tempered by a new sense of openness. I found myself watching him as he moved around the kitchen, noticing the subtle grace in his actions that made my heart flutter all over again. It was as if I was seeing him in a fresh light, a glimpse of something I'd longed for without even realizing it. Later, as we sat together at the kitchen table, the air still pulsed with a quiet electricity, though now it felt more comfortable, less urgent. We didn't feel pressured to dissect every detail of what had just happened. There was plenty of time to explore this connection. After a few moments of easy silence, Jake's eyes met mine. "So, what do we do now?" he asked, the question lingering in the space between us. I paused, feeling the gravity of that moment. We had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, yet that didn't mean we had to solve everything immediately. "We keep moving forward," I replied softly but with resolve. "One day at a time." Jake's genuine smile made my heart skip a beat. "I like that," he said, his voice equally gentle. One day at a time. The tension had shifted into something more manageable, less like a storm and more like a steady, evolving bond. Yes, there were countless unanswered questions, but suddenly it all seemed possible. Perhaps crossing that line wasn't an end at all, but the start of something new we had both secretly desired. As the night wore on, our conversation flowed naturally, as if an unspoken understanding had taken root. There was a profound comfort in knowing we no longer needed to hide our feelings or tiptoe around the truth. In our laughter and quiet talks, everything felt different, more real, more open. As I stirred the pasta and Jake retrieved plates from the cabinet, I stole a glance at him, marveling at the subtle shifts in the way he moved and the quiet strength in his eyes. I couldn't help but be drawn to him, the pull between us undeniable. Later, when the conversation lulled and we sat quietly at the table, Jake's voice broke the stillness once more. "What now?" he asked, his tone gentle yet filled with the weight of our uncharted future. That single question resonated deeply. There were no immediate answers, only the promise of discovery. "We take it day by day," I answered, my voice calm despite the whirlwind of emotions inside. Jake's eyes lit up with understanding as he smiled softly. "One day at a time," he repeated. In that moment, everything felt right. We had stepped into unknown territory together, and while the path ahead was uncertain, it was ours to navigate. The connection between us had grown undeniable, and we both knew that there was no point in pretending anymore. We had crossed a line, yes, but it was a beginning, one that we would explore together, one day at a time. As our conversation began to slow and the night deepened, Jake leaned back in his chair. His gaze met mine in a way that sent shivers down my spine, an intensity that went beyond mere physical attraction. There was something profound in that look, something that had long simmered between us, and now, with no pretenses left, it was impossible to ignore. "I never imagined we'd end up here," he said quietly, his tone gentle yet earnest. "But I'm really glad we did." I searched his eyes, feeling my heart flutter at the tenderness there. This was a side of him I rarely saw. Beyond the confident exterior, there was a vulnerability that made everything seem so genuine and grounded. "Neither am I admitted softly. "I don't know how we got here, but I wouldn't change it for the world." A small, knowing smile tugged at his lips, a smile that made my chest tighten with unexpected emotion. Slowly he reached across the table, his fingers lightly brushing against mine. That simple touch sent a warm wave through me. It wasn't hurried or forceful, just real and reassuring. "I'm not sorry either," Jake replied firmly yet kindly. "I know it's complicated, but I believe we can navigate it together." His words felt like a promise, stirring in me a mix of hope and certainty. We didn't have every answer right now, and that was perfectly all right. What mattered most was that we were in this together. After a moment, Jake stood up and moved beside me. His hand settled on my shoulder, light yet unwavering, and I felt the familiar, magnetic pull of his presence. It was intoxicating, the way he could make me feel both secure and delightfully off balance at the same time. "We should probably get some sleep," he suggested, though there was a hint of something deeper behind his words. I hesitated for a moment, reluctant to let the night end, savoring the quiet intimacy we'd discovered. But I knew he was right. It was late, and we both needed time to process the events of the evening. Jake's hand slid down to my arm as he gently pulled me to stand. For a moment, we lingered close enough to feel each other's warmth without fully touching, a delicate balance where the tension had shifted into a familiar, comforting rhythm. "Are you really sure about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He moved closer, his thumb caressing my cheek softly. "I've never been more certain about anything," he murmured. "We'll take it slowly, one day at a time." Those words were exactly what I needed. The promise of a gradual journey made everything seem less overwhelming. We didn't have to solve all our questions immediately. We just needed to be together and let things evolve naturally. Before leaving, Jake leaned in to plant a soft, lingering kiss on my forehead, a tender gesture that filled me with a cascade of mixed emotions. "I'll see you in the morning," he whispered, his voice warm and reassuring. I nodded, lost for words, as he gave me one final, meaningful look before drifting down the hallway toward his room. Once he was gone, the air in the kitchen felt heavier, charged with the echoes of what had transpired. I stood there a while, trying to piece together the significance of our crossing that line. It hadn't felt wrong. In fact, it had felt almost inevitable, as if we had been slowly moving toward this moment all along. Making my way to my room, my mind raced with thoughts of the night. Yet, amid the whirlwind of emotions, a gentle sense of peace settled over me. Jake and I had taken our first step towards something entirely new, a change that, for the first time in a long while, didn't scare me. I welcomed it. I lay down in bed, my thoughts still swirling, and soon the quiet embrace of sleep took over. The next morning, I awoke to the soft sound of footsteps outside my door. For a moment, panic surged through me as I wondered if everything from the previous night had been a dream. Then the door opened and Jake's face appeared, his eyes carrying the same intense warmth as before. "Morning," he said casually, yet his eyes spoke volumes. "Morning," I replied, sitting up slowly, as he lingered in the doorway with a gentle smile that filled me with an unexpected warmth. An unspoken understanding passed between us. We had stepped into this together, and whatever came next, we would face it side by side. Jake leaned casually against the frame, locking his gaze with mine. "Ready for whatever happens next?" he asked softly. I returned his smile, my heart fluttering at his words. "Yeah," I murmured, "one day at a time." He nodded, his eyes softening as he repeated, "One day at a time." In that moment, everything felt right. It wasn't perfect or easy, but it was undeniably real, and for now, that was enough.